Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
In legends and horror stories, ghosts are typically spirits of the dead, those who suffered greatly in their lives, that when their time comes, they choose to linger in this world, to sow hatred and chaos among the living. Do you believe this, that there are vengeful spirits living among us, right here, right now? I do, and my story will tell you why. I'm Martha. I'm 19 years old, and I have a twin sister, Caroline. She wasn't just my sister, but we were best friends and subsequent partners in crime. We suffered a miserable life because we lived in poverty. Our parents were very poor, despite belonging to a rich family. Grandpa, on my dad's side of the family, worked in the petroleum industry, where he made lots of investments and projects. And fortunately, he had a lot of enemies too, many of whom were from mom's side of the family. Dad was the middle son, but he assumed responsibility for Grandpa's work because he was very competent and capable. Similarly, Mom became responsible for her father's work. She did her best to avoid conflict between her side of the family and Dad's side, so that they could work together peacefully. It was at this point, I believe, that vengeful spirits must have come into play. My parents had loved each other since their childhood, but they didn't tell their families about it. In the past, both my grandpas were once friends and partners. They worked together within the same company, but they later became enemies and split the company into two. Both families hated each other that day forth. All of them, except for my parents. Mom's uncles took over her company and fired her. Dad couldn't bear to see Mom in this situation, so he told his dad that he was going to marry her. So his father made him choose between my mother and the company with all the power and wealth that came with it. To Grandpa's chagrin, Dad chose Mom over everything else. And so, they got married and lived together with Grandma. They faced life's problems without any support from anyone. Grandpa felt betrayed by Dad and disowned him. Then, Carolyn and I were born. Dad did his best to make us happy and give us everything we needed. Grandma told us about our family's history and how both our parents had been cut off from their families out of sheer greed and betrayal. It felt a bit unfair, but this was our life now. Then, one day, we heard Dad speaking on the phone, with Mom standing beside him, and they were both acting very nervous. He told her to take care of us, and then he left the house and never came back. Mom never told us where he went or why he left. Sometime after that, Grandma passed away. Our situation was getting worse. We thought we had to do something to help Mom. Maybe we were being influenced by those vengeful spirits I mentioned. But either way, Carolyn and I made our decision to go over to the dark side. We decided to steal, rob, defraud. We were smart enough. Together, we could definitely pull it off. We began with our neighbor, very wealthy, but very cheap. We figured she must be keeping her money somewhere in the house, since she didn't believe in leaving a dime in the bank's care and was completely convinced that they would steal her money. Lucky for us, I guess. And we were right. We infiltrated her house when she was away and found a load of money stashed away under a loose tile on the floor. Took some time to find, but we got it. When we got home, the house was completely deserted. Mom wasn't there. Her clothes were all gone from the wardrobe. We were on our own now. We began exploiting jewelry shop owners. We would pretend to be a wealthy customer and tell the owner that we wanted to take the jewelry home to show our mom and get her opinion. We would drug hotel owners and put all the money in their safe into a bag, then scream and call for help, saying that the owner had just collapsed, creating a diversion and disappearing in the crowd. We were getting quite good at it. Our wealth slowly grew day by day. Mom called, every now and then, to check that we were fine on our own. Of course, she knew nothing about our work, or what we were doing to survive. Our ultimate goal was to earn a lot of money and run away to another country to start a new life. One evening, I was with my friends, and I met a guy named Craig. He was rich, but somehow seemed different than all the people we robbed. Later I found out, to my surprise, that he was our cousin, the grandson of the man that had taken everything away from my mother and fired her. Unsure of what to do, I told Carolyn what I knew. She went ecstatic. She told me that this was our chance to take back everything, the company, the money that belonged to us. But for the first time, we didn't quite agree. Craig was nothing like his father. He wasn't greedy. He was kind and gentle. He often told me that money was a curse if it meant living alone away from people that we care about and cherish. I made up my mind, and I told Carolyn that I couldn't be a part of our evil scheming anymore, and I wanted out, and so I left her and went to live on my own. At this point, I had no idea what Carolyn was up to. In the meantime, Craig was negotiating a deal that would earn his company a lot of profit. He told me to come visit at the company, and then we would go out for dinner. I accepted happily. When I arrived at his company, I sensed someone behind me. Then, suddenly a hand pressed a handkerchief over my mouth, and I passed out. When I woke up, I found Craig unconscious beside me. To the side, I could see his safe was wide open. Papers were scattered everywhere, and in my hand was the key to the safe. Then the police arrived, found the safe key in my hand, and accused me of being a thief. I told them that I had been drugged unconscious, just like Craig. The police officer looked inside my bag and found a bottle of chloroform. I was shocked, to say the least. I couldn't understand what had happened. They took me downstairs and tried to wake up Craig. At about that time, a woman in a black wig came over to me and said, "Martha, you betrayed me." It was Carolyn. I couldn't believe that she framed me. Then she left. Her betrayal hurt me deeply. A part of my brain told me that I had betrayed her first, but that doesn't matter now. When I get out of prison, someday, I resolved to get my revenge on her. We were no longer sisters. Just as we had been betrayed by our families before us, we were now locked into yet another circle of family betrayal. Only it was more personal and closer to home this time. Were they truly vengeful spirits influencing us? I think so. What about you?
I am Matthew, 21 years old, and I must tell you something. I am a madman. I need treatment. But what kind of treatment is there for my kind of madness? You see before you a man with torn clothes who speaks to himself all the time. I used to be a doctor, but I left medicine to pursue aromatology. In case you were wondering, aromatology is the study of fragrances, such as scents of flowers and how they affect people. Let me tell you my story. My parents were very proud of me because I was intelligent, well-known, and well-respected at my university. I earned high marks in all my courses. Dad wanted me to join the College of Medicine because he had always dreamed of my becoming a doctor, and I felt that I couldn't deny him that. My parents did their best to make me happy and to help me achieve Dad's dream. But to be honest with you, medicine, engineering, the arts, none of these interested me at all. They weren't my dream. I loved flowers and their fragrances, like rose and honeysuckle. I would extract fragrances from them and give them as gifts to my friends and family. They all really enjoyed these aromatic gifts. My dilemma was that I had to find a way to tell Dad that I would rather study botany, plants, and aromatology, fragrances, over medicine any day. I knew he would think that I was crazy to give up the lofty study of medicine to work with flowers, but what can I say? I have loved flowers and fragrances ever since I was a youngster. I have always been fascinated by exotic flowers and scents. Learning how to make fragrances from flowers required me to meet with a lot of people who worked in this field. One day, I had to face the moment I had been dreading because my parents had arranged a large social gathering to celebrate my success at the university and my joining the College of Medicine. Dad asked me to tell everyone about my ambitions as a doctor. I suddenly knew that the moment had come when I needed to make my startling announcement to my parents. I told the audience I had decided that being a doctor was not for me and that I was going to change my field of study. Dad looked at me with an astonished look on his face, and then he began laughing. He thought I was joking. Then I turned to him and said, "Dad, I'm not joking. I'm serious. I want to study flowers and fragrances, similar to the types of gifts I've given you before." The audience suddenly got very quiet. They could sense that this was an epiphany for my parents. The embarrassment and shock in the air was palpable. Dad looked at me and said with an affected smile, "Matthew, you were born to be a doctor. Forget all this nonsense about silly flowers." A little testily, I said, "Dad, extracting fragrances from flowers is not silly." Dad said, "Bah! Forget about that. The party spirit was somewhat subdued after this testy exchange. Regardless, in deference to Dad, I began studying medicine, but most of my energy and attention was directed towards flowers and their fragrances. Sometimes I would spend time with my medical friends, and sometimes with my aromatology friends that I had met earlier. I spent my first year in medical college earning high marks as usual, but I had no passion for it. It neither excited nor interested me. There came a day when I had had my fill of medical studies and just couldn't take it anymore. So I decided to leave the College of Medicine to pursue my true passion, flowers and fragrances. When I told Dad of my decision, he was very upset, cursing at me and accusing me of being mad, insane, crazy. I repeated that I had zero interest in medicine and stated that the true madness was sticking with a field that I really didn't like at all. I moved away from home and stayed with a friend for a while before finally renting and moving into a small apartment. I faced a lot of obstacles in the beginning, but I didn't give up. I set up an arboretum by planting some flowers and nurturing them. I was working on a rare kind of fragrance extracted from a variety of flowers. I had to travel to obtain these specimens. My product fragrances weren't successful at first, but I persisted. Initially, I offered my fragrance products to various factories, but all refused my offer. So I continued in my studies. I worked in many different places. In the evenings, I would spend all my free time doing my experiments. Over time, I grew more proficient in producing unique fragrances. Then one day, I received a phone call from a famous factory. The factory owner told me that he might be interested in working with me, so I sent him some samples of my work, and they delighted him. And I was delighted that he was delighted. Thus began the lucrative stage of my new endeavor. I started earning a decent income and achieved a modicum of success in the end. After a while, I called Dad and asked him to forgive me, and he did, finally realizing that my passions were not necessarily his passions, and that I must pursue what I enjoyed the most. I have my own factory now. I achieved my dream in the end. My advice to you, the readers, is never to give up when pursuing your dreams. With persistence, you will be successful one day. So what do you think? Was I a madman to give up medicine for aromatology? Was I a madman to give up medicine for aromatology?
My son killed me. Yes, you read that correctly. I am not a ghost or an evil spirit that needs rescuing. I have a brave heart. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 years old, I became responsible for taking care of my whole family. I did everything for them, like cooking, cleaning, washing, etc. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced a lot of problems together, illnesses, financial problems, school, and the like. But there came a day when I had to make a life and death decision at my young, tender age. I fell in love, as any girl my age tends to do. My sweetheart turned out to be loved my neighbor, a guy named Dave. We had grown up together, and we shared everything. Love, sadness, jokes. Our dreams had evolved as we grew up too, so we decided to marry. He knew all about my life circumstances, so he chose a flat near my family for me. We had a nice party and celebrated with our families and friends. Every day, he proved himself to be a responsible man. He loved and respected me, and I him. Finishing my studies was one of my dreams, and Dave supported me in every way to achieve it. But my biggest dream was to have a baby. But sometimes life just isn't fair. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart began beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before when I was younger, but I never told my father because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said I had a serious heart condition. And not only that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not a good combination make. So we had to choose between the baby's life or mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the baby. Though they tried hard to persuade me, I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. My father and Dave were so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to live with me. In addition, Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. The day came when I went into labor. They took me to the hospital, where the doctor checked me over and pronounced that my condition was so serious that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to survive this. Dave hugged me, crying tears like a river. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide that fact. I looked to my protruding belly and said to my baby, "I want you to know that I sacrificed myself for you. You had better grow up to be a great young man. I love you." Then the baby started pushing its way into this world. The scene fades to blackness. The baby is born. Suddenly, a year later, a birthday party is being held. The baby is now 1 year old. A woman is singing with the baby and her family. The woman looks at you and winks. Megan says, "Haha, fooled you. I lived through the childbirth. Sometimes life gives us a second chance, but you have to be willing to accept the risk."